Welcome to Raw Politique. I'm joined today by Vijay Prashad, historian and director of the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research.
That's the madness of our moment. It's so mad that a grinding genocide isn't the most compelling news of the day. That something else is the most compelling. It's that mad. The idealism of the United States, where they feel like, hey, listen, we're going to be the most important country forever. We'll just bomb countries and make them into people like the United States. So you combine the Gaza experience with the brazen snatching of an elected president. Certain people think this is great. Other people, very afraid.
So Vijay, welcome again to the show. We're so excited to have you. It's a very critical time to be speaking with you.
It's great to be with you. It's lovely to be on your program again. I mean, partly because it's important for us to continue to talk about what's happening in Palestine. And I know this is a pressing matter for you personally and politically and as a reporter. So I'm very pleased because I must say, with everything that's happening, the madness of our moment, whether it is the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, or it's the Trump threats on Greenland, Palestine is being set aside and the Israelis are continuing the genocide. It's a grinding genocide, a little bit like the kind of the Great War, the First World War. It's a grinding genocide, but it's continuing. And I'm really glad, that you're here and you've been making this something that we can't take our minds off of. So that's the madness of our moment. It's so mad that a grinding genocide isn't the most compelling news of the day. That something else is the most compelling. It's that mad. And the thing is that we are also at the same time humans. And humans have, in my opinion, an infinite capacity for hope. It's infinite. It's infinite. Even people who have been put through the worst atrocities tried their best to hope against hope. They tried their best. It's really important to acknowledge that. So the moment is crazy. It's crazy, yeah? But we have an infinite capacity for hope, and hope generates struggles. And there's a reason why the Israelis can't just send their tanks into Gaza, because people continue to resist. That's their madness of hope. It's insane, like surrender. But no, humans have an infinite quality of hope, and they continue to hope that they're going to keep resisting and staying there and holding their ground. And that, to me, is what we mean by the madness of the moment, and the necessity, in a way, of hope.
And we don't have the luxury to be in a state of hopelessness anyway. Let's talk about this new aggressive hyper-imperialism that we're seeing by the United States. Obviously, you've already referenced Venezuela, and we're seeing Trump go wild everywhere else. What is driving this new sense of hyper-imperialism that you've spoken about?
Well, this comes from, I think, a very realistic appraisal in Washington. I think, after a long period of let's call it, U.S. idealism, the idealism of the United States, where they feel like, hey, listen, we're going to be the most important country forever. This is going to be a new American century. We'll just bomb countries and make them into people like the United States. We just go into Iraq and it becomes a free-market economy. We go into Iraq and Iraqis are going to just take off Iraqi culture, just abandon it, and they're going to suddenly create, suburbs and malls and soccer leagues, and, they're going to stop calling it football and call it soccer, and everybody's going to become like a suburban family outside Chicago or something. That was a kind of idealistic premise after the Soviet Union collapsed. But I think the Trump administration has adopted a realistic attitude, which is that, hey, look, United States is not in 10, 20 years going to be the preponderant power, the main power. And the reason why that is so is that the United States doesn't manufacture high technology goods and services. In fact, manufacturing is very down. Intermediate goods are not being manufactured at the level they used to. Finished goods are not being manufactured. I mean, you're making your cars in Mexico, in Brazil, in Europe, in Southeast Asia. You're not even making made in America cars in the United States. What's going on? Well, the United States sees that China is booming in terms of science and technology, in the lead in electric vehicles, in the lead in green technology. And they say, well, how do we undo them? Well, we can't do it economically. We can't trade them, into poverty. We can't do that because they have actually taken the lead in many areas of human life, particularly communications and high-speed rail. We just can't beggar them by trade. So we're going to have to intimidate them by military force. We're going to have to extend our use of military power, intimidation, and so on, and try to push back every single potential rival. We're going to have to first clean out Chinese influence in Latin America, in the Western Hemisphere, and then eventually outwards to Africa and so on. And so this attack on Venezuela, these comments about Greenland, a new U.S. military presence in southern Argentina, all of this, inclusive of the national security strategy that Trump released late last year, is part of this hyper-imperialist push to basically undo Chinese advances, but not through trade, not through banks, but through tanks.
But how are people supposed to be responding to this aggression, whether militarily or economically? I think everyone knows about Venezuela, but Cuba, for example, he's just signed a presidential order, which is effectively collective punishment against a country that's already suffering. So how are regular people supposed to react and respond to this hyper-imperialism?
It's a very good question, because you're asking a question before that, which is, what are regular people these days? When you say, how should regular people react? Well, what's a regular person these days? There are people in Europe, in the United States, who believe that they don't want to lose their influence in the world. They believe that the Europeans and the United States should be the paramount power. That section of the population is fundamentally behind Trump. I mean, there's large sections of the European public represented by their sort of, soft liberal right-wing, people like Macron and Christian Merz and so on, represented by them, who believe that everything's fine in Trump land as long as they don't interfere with Greenland. Otherwise, everything's just fine. Go ahead and kidnap the president of Venezuela. Go ahead and put even more pressure on Cuba. They don't have any problem with any of that. They just had a problem with Denmark being squeezed over Greenland, Denmark being a NATO country. They have a problem with the United States no longer wanting to fully underwrite the European war in Ukraine against Russia. I mean, that's what they are worried about. So there is a constituency for Mr. Trump, a very considerable, important constituency. At the same time, even within these countries, and let's not go to the rest of the world yet, even within the United States and in Europe, there are large populations that are heartsick about this. They want to be citizens of the planet, not just of their countries. They've been taken to the streets against the ICE raids in the United States, but also against the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores in Venezuela. There is an international campaign to defend Cuba. So there are lots of people in these parts of the world as well. In other parts of the world, in let's call it the global south, there is a sense of the weakness of the moment. I mean, I think this is very much the case, a real sense of the weakness of the moment. If the United States has the military power, has authorization from its major allies to go in there and snatch the president of Venezuela, what's to stop the United States from doing this to any of their countries? I think there's a sense of foreboding in many of the poorer nations. I mean, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we were talking in our institute about the new mood in the global south. The new mood is still there, but it has weakened. You can have a new mood that's strong or weak. The mood itself need not be a statement of strength, but it was stronger. When Colombia, when South Africa, when they all went to the International Court of Justice to take Israel and bring Israel into the dock, that was the strong variant of the new mood. Now these same countries are afraid. Look at what the United States has done. What they did to Venezuela actually is part of what has happened to Gaza, because after having snatched Nicolas Maduro, the current acting president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, receives a phone call from U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who effectively tells Delcy, if you don't concede to our demands now in 15 minutes, we're going to turn downtown Caracas into Gaza. We did that with the Israelis in Palestine. We can do that to you. So you combine the Gaza experience, the kind of obliteration of a civilization, or at least the attempted obliteration, all housing, all buildings, all hospitals, all universities just destroyed, people alive, but everything else destroyed, and a lot of people killed. If you combine that with the brazen snatching of an elected president, imagine the message now being sent to the poorer nations around the world. That's really, I think, how we need to understand that there's a class issue here. Certain people think this is great. Other people, very afraid.